Welcome to another episode of Entrepreneurs. Today, I will be your host, Ashley, and I'm here with my co-host, Rawad and Lee. Hello, guys.
Hey,
Hi everyone.
hello.
Great to see you. And with us, our guest of today is Tom from Switched to Linux. So I'm very excited to get into the conversation with him about his entrepreneurial journey, doing what he is passionate about, and maybe getting a peek into what does an entrepreneur living that van life look like. We're about to find out.
Well, thank you.
Tom, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for agreeing to be here with us today. So we're really looking forward to it. We've all been excited about this meeting happening, and we appreciate you making time for us. So why don't you just give us a brief introduction about, you and a little overview of what you do.
Oh, yeah, that's a long story. I'll try to keep it very, very short.
Okay.
So, I was just a typical normie guy, and I was forced into student loans and college at a young age before I even knew what I really. I had a slightly better idea what I wanted to do. I got into college. I'm like 4 years. That was right around the time when colleges were becoming more about the experience and more people were spending 5 or 6 years there. um, I was like four because I come from a dysfunctional family. We were poverty stricken, and I was just like, I can't finance a lifestyle, and I can't finance the crazy. I got to get out of here. And so I ended up taking what my college advisor said was impossible. I did anatomy and physiology, physical chemistry, organic chemistry, and analytical chemistry in the same year, in my junior year, um, and got my lowest GPA ever, which was 3.25. So academically, I always stood out pretty well. I skipped my master's degree and I got a free ride for a PhD in integrative biological sciences with molecular toxicology. And I worked as a college professor for 3 years. I did not like research. I liked teaching, did not like the college environment. It was crazy. And that was we're going back almost 15 years ago. And when our entire English department was a convent of witches, I'm like, I'm out of here, you know? And so I did web design stuff mostly as a distraction, like as a hobby, because when you're there dealing with cancer cells and doing cancer research, it's kind of crazy. You need something completely detached from your field. So I did website design mostly as a hobby for a few nonprofits. I actually had, back at that time, we're going back into the early 2000s, I had a carnivorous plant collection that was really amazing. And I actually had Wikipedia picked up organically links from my original website teaching people about those. So that was kind of fun in grad school that all happened. And I decided as, hey, let me try my hand in web design. So I left the university setting, and I did web design startups. And then I also did some ed tech. I helped, I was kind of ground floor at working at some ed tech startups. Of course, the company was bought out. They laid off all the PhDs with less than 1 day's notice. And that's why I do not put my stock in other people to pay my paychecks. I want to have the control. I may not make as much money as my credentials may allow, but the freedom is so much worth it. So free. In fact, I moved everything into a van and traveled around the country seeing all the sites. So just in the last 3 years, I think I've been in almost all the lower 48s. So, and then of course you just learn how to make money online doing web design stuff and doing video content. And I write books mostly in Christian areas, but I also do a lot of science fiction stuff as well. And
Wow.
that's about it.
Well, you did an amazing job condensing a lot of information in a very short amount of
Yeah.
time. I'm not surprised, but that's your credentials are and your background are pretty amazing. So, as far as you hit on, on our subject almost immediately, saying that you do not want to depend on someone else for your paycheck. But I would say that perhaps some people would be fearful to step away from a comfortable university position, right? Like maybe
Mhm.
the opportunity of tenure, maybe the opportunity of making really good safe money in a really safe environment. So and you already told us that you did not come from a family that was like very wealthy, very entrepreneur. So what made you different? What made you decide to have, the guts to step away from the comfort of of that type of lifestyle?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there could be a genetic factor at all. My father was actually fairly successful in business. Now, he died in bankruptcy, but he he did have a lot of businesses, and my uncle had businesses on that side, but I've never known anybody on that side of my family. I've only become close with my uncle on that side of my family after my dad died a couple years ago, and everyone, of course, on my mother's side is, yeah, I think they had some good successes over their years as well, but not nearly as much in that focus. So maybe it's that, but maybe it's just I saw the writing on the wall that culture changes and shifts. Um, because there was a time in America, whether you come from a blue collar town and everybody works in the mine or the factory, and there was a time that you would do that. Your dad worked the factory, you come and work the factory. Your dad might be a middle manager now. Everyone's doing well, and the company takes care of everybody. But we've had this major shift in the corporate worlds in the last couple, like I'd say maybe 20 or so years, where the bottom line ended up being more about money than anything else. And so the times of a company taking care of you are gone. And that was evidenced by the fact that, in fact, I think it's outside of the NDA periods, but the university actually reneged on their contract with me. And I actually still have the documents to prove it. They were forced to pay me an entire year of salary, but they reneged on their contract, and because they wanted to hire somebody that was a friend of somebody. There was a lot of nepotism in that. So I saw that. And then when I was working with that startup out of Austin, they actually offered me a full-time job to go down and work with them. I'm like, I don't want to move to Austin. I don't want to rely on a full-time job. I said I'd be glad to work part-time as a contractor. Good thing, because only about 2 years later, they fired everybody because a big company, Macmillan, came in, bought out the whole company, and they streamlined it to make as much money as they possibly could. And they pretty much laid off almost everybody. So I would have been left in a big city of Austin, laid off, like trying to start over again. I'd rather have something always in the back burner that I have more control over. And that's maybe even what led me into Linux. I don't know. But that was the case. So.
Lee, Rawad, anything on this particular subject? I mean, it's quite an experience, and but it sounded like it was an easy decision for you to sort of move out and start working for yourself.
I, it was a little easy, a little hard. I missed the paychecks. I mean, I'll tell you, full benefits and $50,000 a year job is definitely better than having to manage everything for yourself. I mean, I could have made a lot more money, but I've never really been a huge money guy anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's just, sitting here listening to you. I also come from a background with a lot of dysfunctional stuff and poverty. So, I grew up with this thing of all or nothing. So, if I needed to go and do a thing to try and make money, that it was always a terrifying experience because, you know, if it didn't work out, and oftentimes it didn't, wow, I was in a bad place at the end of the day. So
Hmm.
yeah, I just hearing you share your experience without the usual, and I was totally terrified and crushed, and yeah, it's really it's a different sort of take on everything. It's exciting to hear.
Yeah, another thing I want to add is not add, but maybe for later, I would like to know, since I myself am not very comfortable with money for many reasons, but I want to connect this at some point with pricing and asking for money from other people
Mm.
and how you do that. But I guess Ashley has a different path for us.
Well, I have made a note of that, Rawad, so we will get there. Okay. So as far as that goes, then, so these things kind of transpired, and you were forced to leave a comfortable existence to get out on your own. So you were working part-time in web design. Have you always been a tech competent person? Is that something you were just naturally attracted to? And
Um,
you knew that you had the skill set that you could start making money?
that is a fascinating question because I was what you might call a technophobe in all through high school. Now, I actually scored on aptitude tests really high in technology in like 10th grade, 11th grade, but I wanted nothing to do with it. I actually got the highest grade in our chemistry class by doing all of the math on paper on margins on the side of the tests. And all through there, I only even got a calculator when I took trigonometry in my senior year, and they required us to have those fancy TI graphing calculators.
Texas
We were a
Instrument.
Yeah, we were a poor family, and they're telling my mother she needs to go out and spend $100 on a calculator, and my mother did because she was a really good mom in many ways. And I was like, if you're going to force me to buy a $100 calculator, I'm going to use it for more than adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, because a dollar store one can do the same. So I actually taught myself how to do basic programming on the calculator, and I ended up writing some video games, and I learned how to flash it. Of course, the TI calculators you could flash with a program operating system called Z Shell, and you could run like full-fledged video games on it. And so there's all sorts of fun stuff. So I did some of that stuff, and then I said, well, I'm going to go to college, so I don't know anything about computers, but let's buy a computer. And then I learned how to rebuild an operating system when I messed something up. Of course, I was back in Windows 95 era. And so I learned a little bit about the computers and stuff. I wasn't ever what you might call like the best tech in the world. I wasn't a computer science guy. I don't have a CS major, although I scored really high on all of my computer science courses I was forced to take for my undergrad. Um, so I had the competency, but I didn't have the training per se. And so even today, that messes me up, because if I have the competency to do programming, if I had the time to learn how to do it, I could probably double my income or more. Maybe I should, but to each his own, I guess. Um, so I'm always working on it. But one of the things I did early on in web design is I decided on any project I took, I wanted to use it as a learning experience. And so I would always learn new skills. And that led me into all of my themes I use, whether it's WordPress or Joomla sites. Everything I do is custom. So I don't use any prefab themes or things like that. So I've had the aptitude, but I didn't know I could make money on the technology.
Yeah. So was that your first, I mean, was it whenever you stepped away from your university position when you started making money with your own skills, like outside of that type setting?
Yeah, I ended up knowing the business the business professor at our community. That was a community college I was teaching at the last year. And the business professor there, her husband had just a couple years prior left the IT department and started his own private IT consulting firm. And he actually helped me out a lot in my early days. In fact, I still work with him to this day. We don't do a ton of work together, but anytime he has website stuff that needs done, he doesn't want to mess with websites. But he puts together the packages as part of them. I bill him, he bills the client. He makes a little bit of money off it. I make money off it. Everybody's happy. So I think it does start. The best thing you can do if you're starting out is find a mentor who can help you, whether it's driving traffic your way or helping you in figuring out where to find projects. That caveat being said, we are a little bit more crippled now, because back in those days, we had Elance and we had Odesk and we had a number of other sites. We still have a few of those now, but what I unaffectionately call Upchuck is Upwork. And then we have Fiverr and things, but I just don't like all these because they've done away with the ability to work as like a business, and they want everybody to work as this private person and give me your photo ID. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. So the project lead end has died out, except the YouTube channel now gives me project leads. So I have accumulated, I'd say probably about half of the work that I do these days right now has sourced itself from the YouTube channel ultimately.
Okay, so you did end up having a relationship with somebody that sort of kind
Mhm.
of got you started in
Yep.
that way. Now, after facing something that I would consider to be adverse conditions, did you have feelings of defeat, feelings of despair, or did you just, what was your approach to that? I mean, it sounds like somebody like you, it sounds like you take these things in stride and you do not let it get you down, right? Like you understand that
Mhm.
that's maybe part of it and you're just pivoting onto the next thing. But tell us about that a
Yeah.
little bit.
So, feelings of despair, no. Feelings of defeat, no. And that comes from I was the kid in school who was teased his whole life. And back around ninth or 10th grade, I'm like, you know what? These people can't control my life. And I've always had this, I don't care what you think attitude. So I had no level of defeat. Now, sincere anger towards the people who have mistreated me in those ways, just the nepotism that led to lost jobs, the nepotism that led to firing everybody on, less than a day's notice, that type of stuff. Yeah, you gotta fight the bitter pill to not let that overcome you, because you can't. I mean, it's in the past, it's done. But at the same time, that's what led to the strength. But the strength came from the fact that no, I'm not going to be defeated. The things that I've overcome, I wrote in my book, which is my story, a lot of the different, just a lot of the different elements of my life. And psychologists recognize 5 forms of abuse, and I've experienced all of them. So, like, ooh, that's the same thing when we had that anime avatar guy try to cancel me earlier in the year. I bring it. I don't care.
Right.
It's just you're not going to bully me out of existence. Is not going to happen, you know.
Yeah. So you have a real resilience of spirit, and it sounds
Mhm.
like that has
Yeah.
served you very well at every turn. So let's then go to how you got to where you're at now. Like, when did you decide I'm doing the van life? What is van life, working, teaching people, producing content? What does that mean for you? What does your day-to-day look like?
Okay, so let's cover how I got there first, then we'll hit the day-to-day next. So how I got there was it was a lot more planned and meticulous than some people know. I actually planned on it over 5 years before moving into the van. And it maybe the seed of it might have started when I was mentoring kids out in the West. And we leave a Golden Corral, and parked right next to my car is one of the very first ever Airstreams, the big ones in the Sprinter vans. Like, wow. And one of the kids like, man, we should get one of those someday and just travel around the country. Oh, that sounds fun. Okay. So and then I moved back to Pennsylvania, and I was still actively involved in youth mentoring. And I started, what I first saw is I converted first to more minimalism, because I'm moving around from house to house, apartment to apartment, things I haven't touched for years. I'm like, why? So I started taking stock of all this kind of stuff, and I just purged. I got rid of a bunch of stuff. And in following some of the minimalism stuff, I then found some van life stuff. I'm like, well, that looks interesting. And then it kind of tied into that seed earlier with those other kids. But then I looked at everything and said, well, I already have a web design company, and I was just then starting the YouTube channel at that time. I said, if I do van life, I have to be able to keep these going, so that's kind of the requirement. So I spent about 5 years researching and testing things. I was buying small solar setups just to see how well solar panels work. What are the limitations you can do with batteries? What can you do with DC versus AC power? Um, I experimented with cellular internet systems and things like that. So there was just a lot of back and forth that I did experimenting. And then at that time, I was working with a kid who was, I think he would have been 16 at that time. I didn't want to just leave him, at that critical age. And so I kind of waited until he was, I think he was maybe 20 or so, 20 or 21 when I left. And, he got established in a good, solid job, and started living on his own, and he was doing great in life. I'm like, well, I'm going to van life. And so I bought the van, and I bought it, I think, in March, and I built it myself. Everything we have here, I built it myself in 3 months. I did 1 month of testing, and then I dropped off the keys to the last apartment I've had. And since then, I've just been full time in the van. So that's how that happened. And then day to day life. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. Van life is not all glim and glamour. There are times you're staying at gas station parking lots or in places on the side of the road that you're not sure you're allowed to stay at, but you're just too tired to keep going. There are other times you're in, I'll use BLM land. People don't understand what you're talking about when you do that. It's not Black Lives Matter. It's Bureau of Land Management here in the United States. Particularly in the West, there's a lot of land that is owned by the federal government, and most of that land, any American or any person really can go out there and camp for 14 days. And then you need to pack up and take everything with you and leave and go at least 30 miles away and do it again. So when you get out there into the West, yeah, you park in a BLM spot. You got a beautiful desert or a mountain or a forest or a stream. And that's the cool thing is I have just this trip. I have been to caves. I have hiked on top of mountains. I have hiked sand dunes and deserts. I've hiked through streams and rivers. I've camped on bayous. Um, oh man, where it's like I visited giant sequoia trees. I camped on this edge of a volcano this year. That was fun. So it's just the things you can do in that day to day. And then what I need to figure out is where and how to work. So I consult FCC charts are fairly accurate as to where you can get cell signal. And then I overlay that with where you can legally camp. So there is when I'm on the road, a lot more time goes into research. So less time goes into work. Right now, I'm back in central Pennsylvania. I have a parking spot in a friend's driveway. And I don't have to leave for a while, which is good because I have a lot of big projects I'm working on. And if I don't have to think about that, I can sit here, I can stay up until I fall asleep and work and get up. It doesn't really matter. So that's the biggest takeaway in van life is day-to-day changes in a heartbeat. You might have to get up at 6 a.m. and leave. You might be able to stay there as long as you want. It's really however it is.
That's really amazing, very fascinating. So as far as your business, why don't you talk to us a little bit about your actual business mix? You have a lot of projects that you work on, and obviously you do have your channel and your content that you create. So how are you able to monetize these things, and what do you monetize to keep, to keep gas in the tank?
So starting with the web design work, which I've been doing for a long time. So I manage and host, I'd probably say 30 or 40 different websites. And all those servers, I don't use any external companies anymore other than cloud hosters. So my sites are spread between Linode and DigitalOcean on servers that I built myself. We manage all those. So I obviously will host the sites. I will build sites for people. I will do some basic site maintenance. And in some sites, we do a little bit more more marketing type stuff. Unfortunately, one of my clients, I do have to get on Facebook because we haven't found anybody else that could do it. So I have to bust a hole in my firewall for that one, but hey, it works. So that is obviously how we do that. That's pretty standard, find clients, usually word of mouth these days, or they hear about it on YouTube channels or things like that. And I focus, say, if anybody's looking for work, I focus mostly on management of small business websites, things like that. So that's that. As far as authoring, I have written, I think 9 or 10 books. I forget how many now, mostly in the Christian world. But I also have one science fiction novel, and I've been doing short stories for my supporters. We have Patreon, local Subscribe Star, and I have my own, which I won't mention the name of that one because I hate the site and we want to change it before I bring more people into it. So if you're on any of those platforms, once a month we do a short story. And they're science fiction related to current things currently going on in legal policy somewhere around the world. So we've done some looking at they're trying to interconnect cars between LiDAR and 5G Bluetooth nearby Bluetooth frequencies. So we did one on that. What happens with the police get that? They can basically have computers know you're coming based on the technology, things like that. And then what happens when there's a mistaken identity, which happens in computer glitches. So we cover those in that short story. Our more recent one looks at the upcoming central bank digital currency. So that one is, and people love that one so far. We did one based on dream marketing. Of course, we're trying to cram ads everywhere. MIT right now is experimenting with how to market to people in their dreams. So we did a video on that, or a short story on that. So I'll be collecting all those together and sending those out for a book for sale as well to the general public. But everybody on my supporter network, they get those as they come out, print and audiobook form, and we'll eventually have a full ebook for that as well. So having the books, obviously, you can buy them anywhere you buy books online. And so that's a good revenue. You mentioned those here and there. I think I probably have more people on my Christian stream, my Christian podcast than I know about, but I intentionally don't keep statistics over there because I do sell a lot more books than somebody in my position should sell, based on just my raw numbers. A typical person who's not connected to a big corporation might sell 50 books in a lifetime, and there's times I sell 50 bucks a month. So there's that. And then the big one, obviously, right now is the YouTube channel, which is the Switch to Linux brand. And there is where we teach about, taking control of your operating systems. And that kind of ties in with, how do you ask for money and things. I generally don't a lot. People are just willing to, people are willing to support it, especially if they're like, I turn off ad blockers, but I want to support my content creators. So here's money, whether it be a super chat or a tip or jumping onto one of our supporter networks. So that's really how we monetize that. Of course, there's the YouTube ad revenue as well and things like that. So that's kind of what you do is I throw a lot of mud against a lot of walls, and well, enough sticks to make my ends meet. Although it'd be nice if a little bit more stuck from time to time.
Yeah, so I think that's very interesting. You have quite a diversified way that you're making money. So I do think that this is a good time to bring up Rawad's question about money. Rawad, do you want to ask that?
Yeah. So yeah, Tom already did touch on some of that, but I meant more like when you're setting your prices, especially maybe in web design, when you're asking for money and you're pricing a project.
Yeah, so that was difficult to come up with initially. So I looked around to see online the sites I mentioned, like right now Upwork is a big one. You might go online and see what people are asking for and see how frequently people are bidding and things. And you might look around, there's, depending on which country you're in, there's national database tables about what average people and average levels of experience and whatever else make. And I pretty much just set my prices, and I set them probably a little bit lower because I don't have a ton of overhead. But I've still had times people said, well, that's too much, I can't pay that. Like, okay. And I do offer a discount price for nonprofits. So we're working right now on an international science society, and I've given them a pretty good discount to do the work they need done. So a lot of it is, and then sometimes I'll use like a surge pricing model. If I'm super busy, I might, and somebody reaches out specifically, I might give them a highball bid. If I'm not busy at all, I'll probably give them a lowball bid. Because if if I'm super busy, a highball bid's going to be enough to take on the extra work when I'm already super busy. But if I'm super busy, I'm not going to do a lowball bid because I don't have time anyway. So, I will do that. So the negative consequence of that is I have different clients on different billing amounts, which is a problem. I shouldn't do that. And no, somebody starting out, I would recommend not doing that. But a lot of it is because if I start a client, I rarely raise my prices on them. But as I add on new clients, I do raise my prices from time to time. And so newer clients might be paid at a higher rate than an old client who has been consistently giving me money. But if you disappear on me for 2 years and then you want to come back, you're getting the higher pricing when you come back. So that's a lot of what I've done is I've just looked at what sites are, and then I actually have a notebook. I'm not going to grab it because it's beyond my camera. I actually have a notebook that for 5 or so years, every single project I've done, I have logged every bit of time it takes me and the scope of the entire project. That way I can look, and if somebody says, hey, I need a project like this, I can flip through that book and I can look for a similar project and I can get a realistic time as how much time it takes me. And then often a single project, I don't do hourly. I will do it as project per project base. So I already have a long track record of how long it's going to take me to do a project. Because of that, I can get a better handle of how much time I'm going to take, how much money I need to charge, and come up with a fair number for everybody. So every project is slightly different.
Yeah, thank you. And you mentioned you have a team, right? Because you've been saying we, and I can imagine doing all of these things. You're not able to do everything by
I
yourself.
usually it's me, myself, I and my
Just
cats.
yourself.
Occasionally I will have contractors and things. Of course, on Switch to Linux, I have guys that will help out with either topic ideas, correct me in our trusted member section, or our latest meme is STL is fake news. Every time I make an error, that's our meme. So there's that. I have a guy that's helping right now with posting out the links everywhere on social media, which is a huge help because these are things that take some extra time. He's happy to do it. I'm very thankful for that. So as far as a full-fledged team, no, I don't have a regular full-fledged team, but I do occasionally bring on contractors when the workload gets high.
Okay.
Lee, do you have anything here?
I don't. I'm just in awe and getting a chance to hear all this cool stuff going down. So it's just great to sit here and listen. Thank you.
So, as far as the challenges that you experience as an entrepreneur, why don't you talk to us about some of that? I mean, we've gone over some of it, right? Balancing a very busy schedule, dealing with different pricing models at different times, different people, that certainly can be challenging. And you have a lot of irons in the fire, which I think, even for a very organized person, that could get to a point that could be challenging. But what else, if we're really taking an insight into your entrepreneurial journey, then what are the real deal challenges that you face? And that could be from anything, right? Censorship, getting around, big
Yeah.
tech, whatever that may be for
Oh,
you.
there's a lot that we said there. All right. So first, let's start with irons in the fire. I have too many irons in the fire. Completely acknowledge that. And I want some of these irons to come out of the fire. The problem is if I pull some of them out of the fire too early, I will not have enough funds to cover everything else. So right now I'm looking at all the various options at what we're doing and saying, okay, what can stay? What can go? What do I need to focus time on now so that in 6 months or a year, I could drop something else off? What will complement other things. So like writing books is a good complement, particularly if I'm doing them in the science fiction, since my channel is close to that. Continuing to write science fiction and having books out there means that there's now another product out there. And in my experience as an author, the more books an author has, the more books the author will sell. And so that's good in that respect. Other factor, obviously, geopolitical issues, taxes are absolutely atrocious. And when you are an entrepreneur, the first thing you remember in the United States is we have this backwards weird nonsense where up to your first $100,000, you need to pay your own self-employment tax, which is 15% on top of everything else you're paying. So we think about how high taxes are. Well, we need to pay an extra 15%. It's technically an extra 7%, because what happens is when you're in America, when you're a W-2 wage payroll employee, your employer pays FICA tax and you pay FICA tax. You and your employer pay the same tax. That goes into the Social Security system. When you are self-employed for the first $100,000, I have to pay all of that. And I have letters from the Social Security Administration that I will never see Social Security. So it's a giant Ponzi scheme that I am helping to fund the future generation on money I desperately need right now. So we definitely need to change some of that. Serious problems there. So taxes and quarterlies and things, like I was just hit with a $2,500 tax bill on top of quarterlies being owed. And that was another, I think, $1,500 on top of that for quarterlies. At the same time, it's like, I don't have an extra $4,000 laying around. So got to get creative. And that's an issue. You mentioned censorship. That's, of course, why we have our channel in so many places. For a long time, I wanted to stay on a narrow focus. Let's stay just on YouTube to solidify that base. The problem is I kept getting community strikes for talking about the Kodi Media Player, which is available for download in the Google Play Store. I don't know why you have a problem with that program. But we got, I think, 2 community strikes on that. And we got one on Hypnotics, which is completely free, not piracy at all. It's just available in the Linux Mint operating system. And of course, we got one due to some things we talked about in the Kofi time. But it's still unjust in my opinion. But, censorship is a real problem. And that's the concern of saying, man, YouTube's going well. I should throw more eggs in that basket. And I was like, yeah, they could just delete the channel in one quick second. So you got that as well. But if they delete the YouTube channel in one quick second, we still do have a very big audience on Odyssey and on Rumble and on BitChute. So is it enough to pay the bills? I don't know. I have no idea. So it's difficult to figure out all those challenges, particularly with as many different projects that I do. But, something needs to drop. I'm aware of that. I just don't know exactly what that is.
Right. Well, I think that's a really good glimpse, because sometimes it can, from the outside, somebody who is an educator, an author who seems so put together, it can really give the appearance that they have everything figured out. So it's very nice to hear. I mean, not nice that you have these problems, but it's nice of you to share that I'm not perfect. Doing something very well and doing something that you're passionate about does not mean that you are perfect at everything. It means that you're constantly balancing and adjusting and figuring out what is going to make your life and your flow better.
Yeah. Anyone that thinks they're perfect, start a YouTube channel and read your comments. You'll learn real quick you're not perfect. Sometimes it's justified criticism, sometimes it's not. But there's a lot of things I get wrong from time to time,
Yeah. Well, so we talked about the challenges that you face. So why don't you talk to us about the excellent parts of being an entrepreneur? What does that allow in your life that you don't see for people that are, a wage slave, as it were?
Yeah, the biggest draw for me is to have the flexibility and the freedom. I mean, if I get up and it's a super bad day, I don't gotta go into work right now. I can go take a walk. Like where I'm parked here, there's a lake quarter mile down the road. I can go walk around that lake and it's a beautiful hike. Of course, the downside to that, of course, is if you take too many walks around the lake, you can't pay your bills. And so you have to have a degree of discipline. But the biggest advantages are the freedom, the flexibility, and the control that you might have. I can look at things and say, I'm not going to take on that project. I might have had a conversation with somebody on the phone and I go, don't want to work with that guy. Or at least I'm going to get 100% money up front, you know? So obviously another downside of the entrepreneur life is you have to figure out how to collect money. You have to not be as, you have to not be timid and asking for money if you have done the work. And you also have to be willing to let people go. I actually had to fire one of my biggest clients a couple years ago because he just consistently wasn't paying his bills. He still owes me money. I'm not going to pursue it unless he tries to do something crazy on his end or something. But at some point in time, you have to make a hard decision and say, and that's probably the thing that hurt me the most financially is I had to get rid of one of my biggest clients. But the problem is I wasn't getting predictably paid. And so I'd rather focus my time on things that I know I'm getting predictably paid. And then figuring out, it's like I have another one that he hasn't paid his bill yet, but I've talked to him. He's like, yeah, he had something weird happen this month. I completely understand it. He will pay. He's really good for it. But I did have to call him up like, hey, I sent this bill out a couple of days ago, right? You have to be not too, but actually I've had to do that twice this week. Actually one of them was just are we renewing this or not? Because he had some changes in some of the things he was doing. So, but it's good connect with your clients too. So.
Yeah. Well, is that one of the most difficult things that you do you think, is having these like sometimes uncomfortable conversations with people about money?
I am, maybe in the early days, probably, but anymore, no, because everybody realizes they hired me because they don't know how to do it or don't want to do it themselves. And so they know they owe the money. That might have just, they might just be as busy as I am and something fell through the cracks. And so if you've sent me an email and I haven't got back to you yet, it either fell through the cracks or, hey, I have this problem right now with my emails are sometimes bouncing or landing in your spam. So, check your spam. Make sure I'm still getting your email. Um, so anymore now, it's not a big deal.
So, what is your definition of success for yourself?
As a Christian, the best definition of success is, am I pleasing and honoring God in the things that I do? And so I don't look far beyond that. I'm not looking at who owns the most property. I'm not looking at who makes the most money. I'm not looking at who has the better reputation. I'm looking at, have I honored God by honoring his word and clearly preaching his word and clearly living his life? That is the best definition of success, in my opinion.
I think that's really good. I like to hear that. So, is that something that you have always had? I mean, you had mentioned to us earlier that you weren't driven by money necessarily. I mean, you need enough to pay the
Mhm.
bills,
Yeah.
but did you ever have the traditional sense of success, the money, the wealth, the property, any of that, or have you always had sort of a different view of that?
Um, there was probably a time that I cared a little bit more about it. Particularly, particularly anytime you're just finishing college or you're going through college, you're like, I'm gonna leave this, I'm gonna get a huge job, making millions, I'm gonna, we all have delusions of grandeur of those ideas, but I can't look back and say I ever really wanted that. I've always really just give me enough for my freedom and independence, and don't rely so much on having money. But I can say though, on that front, in grad school, there were some times that I didn't run into the office maybe as early as I should have, and I stopped at bagel shops and I, either wrote in journals or whatever else. I'm like, man, this would be the life to not have to worry about money, to the point where I could go out to a bagel shop early in the morning and, just take life slow. And the reality is, I've allowed myself to build for that. I don't make as much as I could, but I'm okay with that because I live a much lower stress life. I'm actually a lot older than I look. That's what some people are shocked by. And I attribute that to the fact that I try and get regular exercise. I don't have a lot of stress in my life. I try and eat well, other than cookies are good. But, you know,
So, what advice do you have for people that are interested in becoming an entrepreneur? What if they're not a genius tech wizard? Then what?
well, I'm not a genius tech wizard. So, uh, I would say that I think the best step in is to find a mentor that can help you, but then you can't lean on them so much that you don't learn on your own. It takes a lot of hard work. Looking at the YouTube channel end, a lot of kids want to be YouTubers, but a lot of kids would not want to put up with the work it takes to actually to be a YouTuber. It is really hard, you know. Um, but that really is the point, is that we uh we have to find somebody that can help us in our path. This is why I think we see a lot of generational wealth. It's not that generational wealth comes by somebody just being handed billions. It comes from a person makes a lot of money and learns how to do that and passes a specific skill set to their children, and their children use that specific skill set and do their own entrepreneurs. Many people in this country, at least, who have a lot of money, even if they came from a wealthy family, they weren't handed all of their money out of the gate. They had to learn how to work for it, and they did by learning the skill sets. So reading books about entrepreneurialism, having ideas, and learning how to push boundaries in a way that's comfortable for your ethics, I would say, might be a good thing. And I phrase it that way because some people are more driven to be rules based, and some people are more driven to be like, nah, never mind the rules, I'm just going to do this, and uh, whatever consequences come. So there's two different views. I am more of a rules guy than I am anything else. But at the same time, there's times I might try and push that boundary a little bit. And that's really where the balance is figuring that out, which I think you learn by mentorship, by reading books. Be an active reader. It's expanding your mind is the best thing you can do for your life. And that's the best thing for just for being an entrepreneur, is to always have ideas flowing.
So, the question of ethics is a really good one, and one that is important to Rawad, but I think that it should be important to all of us, right? Is having a good ethical code. But have you been in a position that maybe your ethics could have been compromised, or perhaps you definitely could have been better off if you did compromise your ethics? And, is there an element of sacrifice in your business of keeping high ethical standards?
Mhm. Yeah. So early on in my life, and this would be just after I became a Christian in grad school, and we needed to do, of course, I need to get a lot of dental work done and wisdom teeth extraction and things like that. And so I had this health insurance at the time, which came from my mother's work. But I looked and read over the policy and I looked at it and said, I do not qualify for this policy. This is not a policy for me because of some of the wording in it. It applied to college students. Now, graduate student is not college, it is professional. And I was just at that age where it's not there. And my mother is not the most ethical person in many ways. And she's like, well, just use the insurance. It doesn't care. Nobody matters. I'm like, I'm a Christian. I can't do that. And so rather than utilizing the insurance policy, I ended up as a broke graduate student taking out debt to pay for the work that I needed to do because I was not willing to compromise my ethics and use a policy that I thought in my heart I was not applied to. And so that was one case I can think of off the top of my head. And there's probably more, but that's probably the most striking one I can remember. But for me, you need to have a good, solid ethical stance, and you need to know where that comes from. Uh, One pastor, Chip Ingram, said once in a sermon, he said, everyone agrees we need ethics. Nobody can agree on whose ethics we need. And that is a fascinating thing to think about because as a Christian, I get my moral ethics and code from God. And if you're not of that persuasion, where do you get it from? Like we have right now Harvard ethics professors being brought up on charges of plagiarism. It's just, it's a satire writes itself. And so I think that a strong spiritual basis is where I think you get the best ethics. And I would trust the ethics of a strong spiritual person before I would trust the ethics of somebody who says there is no God, because in which case, what is the foundation of our rules? What's the foundation of our laws? We have to have something to base it on.
Very well said. I do want to take a moment and just check in with Lee and Rawad to see if you guys have anything that you would like to ask or any comments here.
I do. What about you, Lee? Want to go first? Good. Yeah, I wanted to ask about mentorship. This is something I've heard a lot about, but how do you find a mentor? Does it have to be someone who you know personally, or it can be an influencer, like,
I
or a
think
book?
that if you can find somebody personally, or at least you can talk to in real life, it's usually slightly more impactful. But I really, as I look back in my life, I think that books still is the primary go-to for most people, even the people that say you should have a mentor. I still think books are the best. Like I was just looking at how launching businesses and things. I just picked up a book on it's called Launch, and it just did a variety of different ways of launching businesses in a digital age and things. And there were some things that I was like, yeah, I wouldn't do that. There are things like, I didn't never thought of that, and that looks fascinating. And so reading books, I think, is your best approach. If you can have a direct one-on-one with somebody, that's good. But we also have to try and respect people's times on things as well. Some people are more than happy to help. I'm more than happy to help sometimes, but right now I am so busy. I can't do a lot of one-on-one personal stuff. And that's one of the challenges that I would like to see corrected. because I would love to have more time to spend with more people and help more people along. But I just, like we talked about earlier, I have too many irons in the fire right now. And until I get a few of those irons out, I don't have a lot of free time. So, but it doesn't hurt to reach out to somebody, offer to buy them lunch if they're local. Um, Meeting up in like business communities is good. I've actually had a conversation with the guy that created VidMe, one of the original co-creators. Turned out his father or father-in-law was in a chamber of commerce I was a member of, and he actually lived in the town I lived in at the time. And so he's like, oh yeah. So I end up having a conversation with him one day, which was fun. And it wasn't like a long-term mentorship, but he gave me a lot of fascinating ideas of things to look at, which was a neat conversation. In the tech world, there was like Eli, the computer guy, used to do some business consulting type stuff. So I actually paid for a session with him at one point in time. Paying for sessions with people is good. And that was, I thought the conversation with him was very valuable to me at the time, which was good. So you can seek those out if you attend conferences and things like that. So I do a lot of things mostly in the writers conference world. And so last year I was teaching at a writers conference. This year I'm not planning to teach in writers conferences. I'm just going and attending them. But you get into writers conferences and you might meet up with people that have been writing books, for example, far longer. And sitting down with somebody at a conference for half hour asking basic questions is more valuable than maybe even a seminar at the conference itself. So it's put yourself in the place where you will find people that are already doing what you're trying to achieve and talk to them about how to do that.
Just showing up.
Yeah. Showing up and taking the initiative to say, hi, do you have a minute is valuable.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And what about courses? Do you take any courses, or you try to implement everything yourself, doing it yourself first?
Yes and no. So I tend to learn a lot out of books and things. So like I've actually completed effectively year one university Greek. Never studied any other languages in schools or anything, but I'm actually fairly competent with my Greek. Um, so just doing that and learning the skills and things like that. I think courses are very, very valuable. And I'm looking at the possibility of doing some Switch to Linux courses down the road. So we're still evaluating it. Actually, I just had a good meeting session with somebody the other day who's a really good marketer. And I was throwing a bunch of ideas around him. Sorry for the truck passing by, dangers of van life. So I don't know if you guys heard it, but I did. But we had a lot of good conversations. He's like, well, you should look into this, this, and this, and then organize it this way. He says, I would do this and not this. Those are all things I am writing down and evaluating. I think courses are great. And it goes down to that irons in the fire thing. I would love to take more courses. Do I want to throw another iron in the fire right now? In fact, I've actually have not studied even my Greek for a couple months now because I'm really just trying to get a couple of these huge projects out of the way, and take care of a couple other immediate needs first. So,
Very good. Lee, anything here? Okay. So one of the things that I wanted to ask about then is, with everything that you have going on, I feel like we have talked about a lot of things. I mean, including like pursuing other interests that you have, maybe something that you have to sacrifice. But what does sacrifice look like to you? What do you have to say no to so that you can live the life that you want to live, so you can be successful in your business?
Well, the biggest series we had to get rid of on Switch to Linux was the Distro Wars, which is very popular. I had to say no to that because it takes too much bandwidth. Downloading 2 distros a week, installing them both, and playing with them and doing a lot of live stuff. Bandwidth. So there is a huge limitation to van life and YouTubing in that I am limited on that. So that's certainly one major sacrifice. Some people might say you sacrifice, and I do in many ways sacrifice a good, solid, regular attendance at a local church. Obviously faith is important, but it has given me the chance to visit, churches in 30 or so different states and see who does church well and who doesn't and evaluate why. So I can really sit down and have competent discussions with pastors about, hey, what do I think about your church and what might you be doing right and what might you want to consider some changes to? So just in the last, in fact, 2 weeks, I've been to two different churches. One of them forbids children in their congregation, and the other one absolutely insists on them being there. so, so people do church in different ways. Looking at things, you sacrifice that, but I haven't sacrificed a lot because in our current age, most of us have friends all around the place. And van life has given me the ability to visit my friends in person, no matter where they are in the country. And that's a great thing. That is a really great thing. Other
Yeah.
sacrifices, obviously I sacrifice a company paying me health and whatever other benefits. I sacrifice, I mean, I'd say I sacrifice a little bit higher income, but that's probably just a me problem. If I cared more about money, I might find a way to make more of it. But, so that being said, off the top of my head, I can't think of other major sacrifices right now. I'm sure there's plenty of them. I'll think of 10 of them when we turn off the camera, but
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that I was definitely interested in, and you touched on it, is the human element, right? But you're saying that you don't feel like you sacrifice the human element. In fact, it sounds like you have very much other people in your life wherever
Mhm.
you go. You have friends that you're meeting, you have churches that you're attending. So I think that that would be something that would be important for people to make sure that they cultivate that,
Yeah.
in living a life that's kind of on the road, but making sure that you have the human connection all over. So I think
Mhm.
that's really lovely.
Yeah. And for clarity, I really do think especially the way our current economic world is going, I think it is best to take an approach that people need to have a good, strong, solid local community that they know. Because we are getting into times that it might be hard to pay for food in the near future if things continue down the pathway they're going down. And so we have to be honest to that and recognize that, hey, if I can grow potatoes and you can grow bunny rabbits, maybe we can swap out and get a balanced nutrition. Um, so I do that is brings up another thing. I do sacrifice as a lot more preparation. Um, I don't eat bad on the road, but I do eat the same meals consistently. I cook all my own food from raw ingredients, but I make fewer food options. When I have a house, I make my own bone broths. I make my own soups from those. I make my own ice creams. I have a lot better control over the food stores, how much food I prepare, how much food I store. I can't I can't even carry a bucket of, dry rations in the van. There's just not that much space. Although I have a storage unit, so which I can get to most of the year pretty easily. I can store stuff there. Um, but while I do visit friends around the country, it sometimes might be better if we don't travel around as much, if we focus a lot on building your local relationships. And that's something that I've come to realize the importance of while on the road, that it's one of those things you may not think about. So if you're listening to this and you have no interest in van life, I would highly encourage you to get together and with local people and do some type of local fellowship, whether that's a spiritual fellowship or just a regular friend group that gets together, or maybe a co-op of farmers or whatever it is. Have a local community that when you need something or you need help, you can get that help. That's the best thing that I think that we can do.
Yeah, very good. I feel like that's very, very good advice. So one thing that I wanted to ask you about, you talked about the amount of work it takes to do what you do, particularly, or at least it sounded like to me, the content creation.
Mhm.
So, what part of content creation, because we can go click on your channel, we can see the video, it looks easy to us. So, what aren't we seeing that, the effort, the time, what are those elements that you're working on that we don't see, but it comes together with this really lovely, fun, educational, quippy tutorial?
Yeah. Sometimes it's the deep frustration of you've just done this 5 times in testing, and now the camera's rolling, it doesn't do it. So, sometimes it's just simple things not working. So like I'm going to be doing a video on the initial look at the Raspberry Pi 5, which is so far a beautiful piece of hardware. I spent 2.5 hours last night trying to get the picture showing up on Light DM. Yeah, it is ended up being a permissions issue. Um, so the sometimes the stuff that we do in the background that and that's one of the reasons why my channel is a lot more raw. So there are other channels out there that are so much more polished than mine because I do a lot more things in the raw. I don't plan everything to the nth degree, but sometimes this means that I might come off as not knowing what I'm doing, which sometimes might be a valid criticism, but sometimes isn't. Sometimes it's just the hardware's not doing things. Sometimes it's I've not read the obscure newsletter that 5 people have read, and you have, so you think you're superior, and you tell me about it in your comments. It doesn't really matter. The most important thing for me is I'm having fun and I'm teaching people my experiences, oftentimes in real time. Um, but behind the scenes, I actually have a book of scripts. I have some scripts I've written months ago I haven't done videos on yet. I'm always having to stay up on the news. I'm very current on what's going on in the world, just by nature of doing the weekly news roundup. And then I do a more political thing just privately with a few friends. And then we do obviously the Linux news and stuff, and then playing around with hardware. And then sometimes it's just recording something. Sometimes it just takes an hour or two to process a video. And then sometimes I need to sit down and figure out how to make the thumbnails look better and think about how to do things. And I might need to go back and timestamp a video, things like that. So there's a lot into it. And then not to mention the fact that I receive hundreds of emails. Half of it's just Chinese garbage project, sponsor our stuff. The other half of it's like, have a new e-bike. And then some of it's just like, we will help you out with your TikTok channel. Dude, did you not watch my videos where I actively block TikTok on everything? So there is a lot of back end research. So right now I have a lot of videos in the works when we talk about Graphene OS, when we talk about the Raspberry Pi 5. I still have the video on the Restream servers I need to do, and then writing tutorials. And my website is, I launched the new one with the hopes of making sure it was completely modern, up to date. It's not, because I just don't have time for one more thing. So there's just so many things on the back end. And then of course you're talking with people a lot. I have a lot of emails. Of course, we have our Matrix server. I try and check in on that as much as I can. I try and participate in conversations over there. So there's a lot, there's a lot we can do there. So
Yeah, a lot of work that goes into creating your course or your content. Um, so one thing that I also wanted to touch on is, what can you tell us about the tools that you use for your success? Now, I think in your case, it's probably very unique and very different from maybe what the average entrepreneur may be using, but what tools make you successful or that you use to help
So
make
are
you
we talking
successful?
like software? Are we talking equipment? What are we talking here?
I would say, maybe a mixture. What is your favorite? Like, what
hmm
can't you live without to help you get things done?
Um, so obviously, first and foremost, I use free and open source software. There's a few small exceptions I might use here and there. There are a few areas I will not cross. I will not use HP products. I will not create accounts with Meta. So anything that Meta would own, I have no interest in. Google, I am cautious with. Microsoft, I am cautious with. I still do have an old throwaway Hotmail account, so technically I have a Microsoft account, but I don't really use it for much more than throwaway stuff. So I focus on the free and open source, which means I'm looking for other alternatives, and I might have longer ways around to get to the same locations. Most of your books are designed in InDesign. I use LibreOffice, which I think works better than LibreOffice than InDesign anyway, personally. So I could not live without LibreOffice. That is absolutely an amazing application. Great group of people put it together, and it is so much there. In fact, I see people sometimes on my, why to switch to Linux videos like, well, can I get Microsoft Office to work? I'm like, why would you want to? I mean, if you want something that's like Microsoft Office, I mean, only Office is close. Um, just in the look, it looks the same. It prioritizes DocX over everything else. It's very limited and it doesn't do styles. So point is, Microsoft Office is much more limited than LibreOffice. LibreOffice is excellent. I use GIMP daily because thumbnails and things. I use Kden Live, although we talked about, I need some tips from you guys about doing the video editing with Blender. That is on my list of things to play with, but I have not actually played around with it enough to experiment with it yet. So those are kind of the big tools that I use as far as the software, just free and open source stuff. I look for alternatives. The website alternative2.net is excellent because, if somebody tells me about some great service they're using, I'll just plug it in over there and see what the free option might be. My web analytics is done with Open Web Analytics rather than Google. So I use those types of tools. As far as hardware, I don't use the latest and greatest hardware. I don't have thousands of dollars to invest, but I also I don't do it intentionally because I don't want to be reliant on the latest and greatest. I'm happy with things that I can afford without having payments and things like that. Just looking around at, my DSLR camera I'm recording this on. This is pretty good video quality. I mean, it's out of date now. I bought the camera 8 years ago, so it still works. And maybe someday I'll upgrade it to something 4K, but only when I have moolah in my hands. As long as the government keeps on wanting 15% of my paycheck on top of my regular tax rate, I don't know if that's going to happen. Cell phones, this is my Pixel that I'm running Graphene OS on as a test. Paid $100 for it at a pawn shop. I'm not buying a big $800 phone, not worth it. So I use a little bit lower spec that could come off and slightly lower video quality than other channels, but that's part of the brand, is to be a little bit more raw.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. That's a lot of really interesting stuff. And obviously it's Greek to me and not in the same Greek that you are learning.
Yeah, that's my funny joke.
Yeah. So then my next question is, what is next for you, right? We've established that you have a lot of things that you're committed to. You are extremely busy. You're trying to kind of work on managing and maybe taking some things off of your plate. You obviously are a creative person. I think that we get a real sense that you like to continuously learn, pursue new things. So what is next for you? What is next for Switch to Linux? Talk to us
Mm.
about that and some of your goals.
Yeah, so I really think right now, and based on conversations with my friend the other day, I really think Switch to Linux is where we're going to be trying to put more of our focus on. Because just looking everything over, web design, I think, is kind of a dying breed. AI is taking over. You can probably buy an AI tool at this point in time to build you a website. And this might mean that, small web developers are less in order, albeit most of the people that use those resources will come back crawling back anyway. But that being said, I think that web design is becoming a lot more challenging because companies are forcing 2FA, and people are still in the mindset, hey, we need some type of access. Here's my username and my password. Yeah, that won't help anymore. And we're getting more and more and more of that. And so with that in the changing world, I think we are fastly approaching a post-web designer's world. And so I really think we're going to be focusing more of our time and efforts on polishing the Switch to Linux brand. So I have actually been working for about a year on doing some scripts on some possibilities of some more unified coursework. And we'd like to do a little bit more. Like I said, I want to redo the in-house supporters network. I really haven't done it yet because I just don't know what I want that to look like right now. And obviously tying in a lot more of the science fiction writing to it, making a shift in writing less Christian, more science fiction, just because it matches the brand. And I think that really is how I can help in the world, because we can unite under the fact, whether we are left or right, whether we are Christians or atheists, we can unite under the fact that we need to take control of our computer systems. We need to tell big tech to get a little bit more out of our life. And if that ends up being what we need to do to make an impact on humanity, to sit down and say, hey, you don't have to be beholden to Microsoft. You don't have to be beholden to Google. You don't have to be beholden to Apple. I really want to focus on that as our direction going forward, whatever that might happen to look like. So moving forward, I want to start talking about some of those. Like I said, I think I said off camera with you guys, I'm actually working with somebody right now on more t-shirt designs and things like that. Just things to bring a little bit more life back into the channel. And that's really what our focus is going to be a little bit more. So more on that, less on some of the other things I've been doing.
Amazing. Very exciting. I feel like I've discovered a whole new world with your content, by starting to listen to that. Now, I'm not a tech person, so maybe that's a conversation, or maybe that's one of the courses that you can do is like somebody who is not tech. Where do you start? Where do you start?
Yeah, yeah. Like, and that's one of the things right now, because the phone operating system that Edward Snowden recommends is Graphene OS. I think that's one he's currently recommending. You know how easy, like a non-tech person can install Graphene OS. Now it's limited in that it only works on Pixel devices, which you say it's a Google phone, but honestly, the Google phones are the best smartphones. They have the most unlockability issues. Now, that being said, heed my warning, do not buy a Pixel 8 or an 8 Pro. Serious problems with that Pixel line. Friend of mine bought one, having the Phantom Touch issues. Last night, we flashed every available Pixel system on it. It only took me an hour. Pixel is so easy to work with now. You literally take your phone, you follow 3 on-screen devices, you plug this into your computer, you push a button, and it will flash an operating system. That's how easy Graphene OS is. They have a web-based installer. You need to go in, turn on developer options, enable USB debugging, and OEM unlocking, which it gives you very clear instructions how to do. On Graphene OS, other than that, you plug the phone into the computer and you push a button. And the software on the website will go ahead, download Graphene, put it on your phone, and have everything set up. A non-techie person can run Graphene OS, which is a extremely privacy-focused way of running a phone. I don't know if I like Lineage more still or not. There's a few things Lineage has, but Lineage is a little bit more complicated to work with. So I can understand a person being uncomfortable installing Lineage, but this and then the Pixel phone, you're like, well, I want to sell the Pixel phone. You can plug the same thing in, go on over to Google's website, push the same button, and have stock Google Pixel back on it, and nobody knows the difference. So that's how easy it is. And that's really what the draw is for this stuff. But non-techie person, yeah, we want to work on more non-techie people switching to Linux. And the last couple of videos we've done actually have focused on those as we got a Windows system. And just for anybody that is following along with that story, a friend of mine's Windows 8.0 computer is starting to die. So I bought him a Windows computer. I told him you do not want Windows 11. He's like, why not? Like, it's easier to give you a list of what you might like about it. Nothing. And I don't say that because I think Windows is horrible. He is a guy that wants full control of his life. He's been an engineer. He is retired. Okay. He turns his computer on without the internet and turns on the internet just the point in time he needs to, does what he needs to do, turns the internet off, goes in, deletes all his cookie cache, and then runs CCleaner. Okay. You think he wants Windows 11? No. It's because it's like perpetually popping up and on the internet, and the thing's going to give him notifications like, what's going on? I don't know. So I bought the computer and I wiped it. I put Linux Mint Debian Edition on it. I sent that out to him and he's like, dude, I should have switched to Linux a long time ago. And he's a retired guy in his 60s. That's how easy this is to use it. Now, the downside, of course, is where can we buy computers with Linux pre-installed? You know, they're always very, very expensive and usually international. Well, from here in the States anyway.
Wow. Okay, so we've gotten a lot of really, really good information about, and a glimpse into your life, a very unique spin on entrepreneurship, from your tech background, from content creation to living a van life with your cats.
Hmm.
So I wanted to check in and see if there's any other questions from my co-host here.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to talk about, that thing of turning non-techie people onto Linux. It's such a I've been calling it the black scary window, and one of the things that one of the things I've been trying to sell people on is big tech surveillance, and how maybe they want to avoid it like the plague, you know.
Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, that's been my big thing. And yeah, I'm trying to start my own business dealing with getting people taking any possible device that we can store have Linux on, or install Termux on as well. You know, Termux is great for that sort of thing, and
Hmm.
F-Droid on Android.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's really interesting trying to get people turned on to an unfamiliar operating system that just sounds scary, and all they think about is the terminal.
Yep.
That's all they can see when they hear that word Linux. Oh no. So yeah, I think yeah, I've been watching especially your latest videos, and which have been excellent tutorials, you know, installing stuff, you know, from the beginning sort of thing. um yeah, it's been really great to kind of like, it's like a camaraderie, I think.
Hmm.
And I think that's another way that we might be able to survive as business people or entrepreneurs, is, you know, kind of encouraging people who are more interested in separating themselves and taking their power back, and helping them to do that. That's going to, I think, flourish more in the future
Hmm.
as
Yeah.
well. Because yeah, like you said, web devs are definitely a dying breed. Yeah, I'm a dying breed web dev myself. So
Yep.
yeah, I could totally understand where you were coming from there. So yeah, just had to talk about the camaraderie
Yep.
thing there. So it's good stuff, and really awesome chat with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for the invite.
So Tom, what closing advice could you offer to people that are thinking of starting their own thing? I know we touched on it a little bit, but just some imparted, some last minute wisdom here.
Um, I would say that launching out into your own thing can be scary, but my basic advice for it would be to do it slow, bootstrap it so that it doesn't have to be an emergency. And what I mean by that is, if you quit your job to start your fancy dancy business, but you don't have any clients yet, you are asking for failure, because this money becomes tight really fast, and you don't want to put yourself in that position. So that's what I did with web design. Is I actually started the web design company 6 months out, and then wouldn't you know it, 6 months later, the college decided to uh, go a different way with their hiring. I wasn't super stressed about it, because I'd already had like half a dozen clients at that point in time. I'm like, oh, okay. Had to find a few more things on the side to bridge the gap, because that was in the West, right during Obama's, well, that was George Bush, I think, tanked the economy, and it was Obama just taken over and started to stabilize some things a little bit, and the market crash in '08. That was right around then. Wasn't a good time to lose your job. you know? Um, but it was all right, so that's the thing. Do it slow and go cash free if possible. If you watch the Company Man's channel on YouTube, it is staggering how often you see his videos. Debt is what leads to the company's decline. So he does all these video breakdowns, what has led to their decline, whatever else. There's just one he just did the other day, which only started to decline, was perfectly fine until they took on debt. Toys R Us, debt is what brought them down. I think it was Red Lobster. No, maybe it was Red Lobster. I think he did one on Red Lobster recently. Debt decline. Every company that takes on mass amounts of debt decline. Sears, debt decline. Kmart, debt decline. And so if we can avoid debt as much as possible, bootstrap it up, even if it means you're going much slower, that is your best ticket, because it's like, that's why I offer lower prices. I don't have a lot of debt. I have some, I have more than I would like, but I do not have a ton of debt that I get to the point where it's overwhelming. That's the thing. And I want to pay that off as quick as I can. In fact, I'm only in debt because of this van life anyway.
And the
All
taxes
right.
on that.
What's that?
The taxes is that.
Oh yeah,
Taxes,
taxes. Not much we can do about that.
Yeah, it's built in.
All right, very good. Well, I absolutely appreciate your time so much. We all do. Where can people find you? If they want to find your channel, they want to find your content, they want to support you, they want to find your
Mhm.
books, where do they go?
All right. So there's obviously a lot. We've talked about the irons in the fire here. So the tech stuff, and we cover there not just switching to Linux. We actually cover a lot of why you might want to switch to Linux. It's a fascinating channel, even if you're not interested in Linux. Especially our news is fun too. Lowest view count, but enough people like it, we keep it. That's over at Switch to Linux, which we are on YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble, BitChute. We also stream on DLive and Twitch, although I don't really put much emphasis on those. Of course, Twitter at Switch to Linux. If you are interested in the Christian content, that is also on those same platforms on Our Walk in Christ, YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey. Those are on Our Walk in Christ, and Twitter at Our Walk in Christ over there. And that's where a lot of my books are. Of course, you can just look up my name, Murawski, Murosky, anywhere you buy books online, and you can find books. We are on Patreon at TOMM. We are on Subscribestar at Switch to Linux. We are on Locals at Switch to Linux. So that's the brief summary of where you can find me.
All right, very good. Well, thank you very, very much. And I think that we will draw to a close today. So, Rawad, thank you. Lee, thank you both very much. Tom, thank you so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it and look forward to seeing what you do in the future.
Thank you very much.